know why. It just
So,
keeps on appearing in all of like everything. So just ignore it.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, so you're good to get started then?
Oh yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, let's get
Perfect.
started.
Perfect. Let me just start the recording and then we'll get going, okay?
Okay, sure.
Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of You in My Shoes, where we provide the platform for the able to interact with the disabled. In this episode, we are diving into a conversation that is incredibly important but often left out of mainstream media. We're talking about what it's really like to navigate today's world as a neurodivergent person. The modern world is fast, loud, and honestly designed for a very specific type of brain. To help us understand the reality behind the labels, the masking, and the everyday triumphs, I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Sabine Kwan. Sabine is a self-advocate who is shaking things up and sharing her lived experience with us. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, Sabine. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. So let's talk about a basic Tuesday. But actually, let's get started right from the front. Um, to kick things off, can you take us back a bit? When did you first realize your brain worked a little differently than what society calls normal?
Okay, so just to give some context about my journey,
Hmm.
I first realized, and just some education piece for the audience, neurodivergent is the huger label, but I actually have three specific conditions, which is I have been psychologically basically diagnosed. It's not an official diagnosis, but I do have OCD. And also not an official diagnosis, but a professional says I highly suspect I have this as well, higher functioning autism. And I am officially diagnosed with ADHD, but these three conditions all fall under the neurodivergent banner. So I was first suspected of having like ADHD and OCD, and it was way back around the 2017 to 2018 mark. And this happened after I had a massive breakdown in college, and it was after I was almost failing like a second course. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, I probably need some psychological research to help me with this. And it was only when I sat down with a psychologist that they talked to me about everything, and I told them everything about my life, that I highly suspected I then had ADHD and OCD, and it was that. But honestly, Pratik, I am happy to talk about the rest of my journey, but that was when my journey began.
Okay, I see. So we hear the term masking a lot lately. For anyone listening who doesn't know, what does masking look like for you, and how much energy does it take up on a bad day?
Oh, a lot to be honest, Pratik. So, to give some context to the audience, I was only like, unofficially diagnosed with higher functioning autism 2 years ago, which
Hmm.
is when everything came into place. So, masking is very difficult. And masking is when I feel I have to put up a front or basically like copy certain social norms in order to feel like I fit into society. And I can tell you various examples of this. When I was on a night out with friends, like, like basically last Friday, I was actually very overstimulated by my environment. There was like a lot of loud noise. I had to pay attention to 4 to 5 people talking in front of me. And I actually felt very emotionally overwhelmed when I had to hear all the voices because it kind of made it difficult for me to keep track of what everyone is saying. But masking is what happens when you have to hide basically an aspect of yourself to basically overcompensate for something. So I noticed in myself, it kind of came down to trying to basically like not necessarily lie, but I have to basically pretend I was listening to what I was saying, what they were saying. And also I had to learn how to lip read people. When someone told me something and I didn't sense it, there's this something called auditory processing disorder, which actually happens in people with ADHD and higher functioning autism, such as myself, that when someone says something, you would only basically have a delay of probably 3 to 5 seconds or after, only when you fully process things. So it results in me having to pretend that I know everything, even though I don't. And sometimes I unfortunately have to do this when functioning within society.
That's really sad. Well,
Mhm.
what is the personal cost of constantly trying to fit into the neurotypical mold?
It is honestly kind of draining. I've been judged like several times, to be honest, when essentially, like, for instance, sometimes I need some decompression time, and basically I had to turn down social engagements because I felt there were too much people in the room and it was too overstimulating for me, or I had to leave in the middle of a group gathering because I felt it was too much. But it's sad to say, people have often judged me, saying like, oh, like, maybe she's too standoffish or she needs her own space, or maybe she doesn't want to communicate with the rest of the group. When in fact, it was just I was feeling emotionally and overwhelmed at the time, and there were too much factors that happened. But it results in a lot of a social cost. So an example is I was job networking and I have to talk to the CEO of a consultancy. I only realized that until like the lunch appointment and the location it took place. That was actually very overly stimulating. It was a very crowded restaurant, and yes, there was one person in front of me, so it made it easier. But imagine having to be in a noisy room, paying attention to 30 different voices at the same time as well, and he was speaking in a soft voice as well, so I had to pay as much attention, like lip reading and listening to what he was saying. So that's the social cost. After that experience, I felt very emotionally overwhelmed. It took me 2 to 3 hours just to keep myself, like, emotionally regulate myself and basically calm myself in my room after that encounter. So that's the emotional cost, that I have to pretend that I remember everything like everyone else, and that my anxious needs, my emotional regulation needs are kind of dismissed on behalf of, like, to adapt to a neurotypical model.
Oh. So on the flip side, how has embracing your neurodivergence changed the way you view yourself?
It has basically resulted in a lot more compassion about myself, which is why
Mm.
I recommend to everyone, even if you're highly suspected and you don't have some conditions diagnosed like me, you get help specifically from a professional. Because I used to think, am I the only one who has to basically memorize these social norms or pay attention to these things just to basically fit in? But once I learned the neurodivergent terms and like what masking meant to me, it kind of made me feel more compassionate, as in like, oh, I'm not the only one alone in this, and
Mm.
that, like, there are resources that can help you.
Great. Well, what is the one thing that you absolutely love about the way your brain works that society completely undervalues?
What I love about the way it works is that even though I don't remember things in real time memory,
Mhm.
there's a beautiful way in which my mind connects things. So I was telling this to my husband today, and it was a very beautiful analogy regarding especially everything under the neurodivergent banner. So imagine this. You can have a neurotypical and a neurodivergent person. They can both look in a mirror, and maybe the source material is different, but a neurodivergent person will look at the mirror and maybe say, oh, there's an apple, but I see a purple, and they'll describe it in a way that's very beautiful. Maybe the rest of the world views the apple as like red, but that's the analogy I want to use. Because we are so different, we basically interpret the world in a different way, and we'll figure out unconventional ways to solve things as a result of looking things in a different perspective.
That's very unique. Let's talk about a basic Tuesday. What does a simple trip to a grocery store or riding the public transit feel like for you, sensory-wise?
Very overstimulating.
Oh God.
So let's imagine it like this. And this is related to my OCD as well.
Hmm.
With those with higher functioning autism and OCD, and unfortunately, I can't dive too deep into this topic, unfortunately, because it's only 30 minutes. But imagine this. It's actually very difficult for me to have a regular shift in routine, and I actually had to train myself over time and with the help of professionals on how to adapt easily to changes. So I'll give you an overview. My Tuesday morning, I had a task list. I have 4 things that I wanted to get done by today. Unfortunately, life changes. Maybe those 4 things won't get done in my task list. But when I don't get any of those 4 things done, it would drive my mind absolutely ballistic. So when any of those 4 things don't get done, I would essentially get overwhelmed. And it's like, okay, Pratik, you have to imagine. All right, let's say I were to go to the grocery store. I want to exactly get these 4 things and in this specific time frame and in this specific order. If
Hmm.
any of those things are out of order, I would go absolutely ballistic. Also, when I go into TDC, I can't predict what factors would make me overstimulate or not. Maybe it's a person just randomly tapping on the window. Maybe it's basically a person sitting down to me. The problem is I don't know what would set me off, but there's
Mm.
always something whenever I head outside.
And sorry for I mean, I find it very, very similar in my situation, but what is your typical uh, solution in those situations?
So my typical solution whenever any of these happen to me is that honestly, you need a CBT therapist or someone to be compassionate. Basically, I find the problem is that whenever I tell people about my situation, especially those who don't know my diagnosis, they would try to give me a solution. They're saying like, "Oh, Sabine, you can be more forgiving about yourself. You don't have to do any of those four things." But actually, the best solution for a person like me is actually not offering a solution, but being compassionate and understanding that, hey, I am feeling emotionally overwhelmed, but staying right beside me and supporting me.
Mm.
Because I just need to get the frustration out sometimes, and sometimes that is better than solution. That's the number one thing I would tell you. And to let the person do their routine, even though it sounds rather irrational, because sometimes people soothe themselves by doing these routines. That is what I'll say as a higher functioning autistic person. The second thing that I would say in anyone in my given situation is that when this happens, give yourself like a calm down period, like stop whatever you're doing, head back home if needed. Noise canceling headphones help, but more importantly, like I had to set myself actually an absolute solitude day where I go to myself in a quiet place with no one that I know just to allow myself to be myself like once a week because you need that decompression time and it helps you remain yourself.
Mhm. I understand. Well, let's move on to work-life reality. Let's get into the workplace. What part of the standard 9 to 5 grind do you find the most draining or challenging?
The fact that people expect me to attend a lot of in-person meetings.
Oh,
So
mm,
yeah, it's very sad, but like, I have worked three different jobs. Two of my recent jobs were remote. But what they don't understand is that for me as a neurodivergent person, whatever energy in which I spend my attention on is constantly being drained, especially when it comes to in-person interactions. Because for
mm,
me, I like knowing before I enter a meeting what's the agenda, what needs to be accomplished, and what happens, right? But of course, changes always happen in life. And when there's even a slight change, or I feel there's a sudden, meeting, like someone wanting to do a sudden Slack call with me, that is actually what gets me overwhelmed. And unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be that much compassion about that, especially when it comes to being neurodivergent in the workplace. Neurodivergent people actually bring a lot of value to organizations. Like I built a lot of asynchronous networks to get stuff efficiently done without the meetings and various other things. But of course, people, myself included, understand like, oh, of course you need to meet face to face to get stuff done. But what people don't understand is that it's actually, sensory overloaded for myself and actually causes me a lot of anxiety. So that's the cost I'm talking about, Pratik, and I wish organizations knew about it. It's not that I don't want to talk to people, it's that I actually feel it affects my psychological well-being.
I see.
Hmm.
Well, have you ever kept your neurodivergence a secret at work? What went into that decision?
So in my latest workplace, I actually advocated with HR. I told them about
Mm,
my conditions, and they were surprisingly kind of understanding and accepting, which is great. But
mm,
I think what a lot of people fear about having in my position is that if you advocate for yourself as different than anyone else with your own needs, that you're at a risk of being terminated. And that was
mm.
a fear in which I used to have too. I think the problem that I would actually pose, and I would like to encourage all organizations actually, is hey, we're not different. We're actually adding to your organization. And if you are advanced enough as an organization, you actually create stuff for us that makes it easy for us to work, which helps everyone at all as well. I actually generated an AI framework that allows people to summarize meetings and actually get more focus working on. But unfortunately, this stuff gets overlooked, right? Because it's hard to advocate for yourself when you believe that you're only a minority of the population. And that is what I would like to advocate for is that we should be advocated for and our needs should be taken into account.
I see. Well, how do you push past the fear of judgment when you actually need to ask a boss or coworker for help?
I think how I would phrase it is a lot of neurodivergent people, like myself included, might think that by advocating by these things, we're overcompensating. There's always a fear of overcompensating, and there's always a fear that you'll be judged. I do admit, and I'm ashamed to say, Pradeep, that even when I openly disclosed to people, I still felt I was being judged because I felt in every single meeting when I was trying to advocate myself, I had to explain things over and over and over again, which doesn't really make it difficult. It makes it very difficult for me to advocate change. How I would phrase it instead is, hey, if this will help me, how will it help everyone else? And more importantly, how will it help the organization? When I phrase it as a matter as in, look, I get burnt out by too much meetings, or I find like, sometimes the meetings aren't structured enough, or hey, I feel that, a lot of time could be actually saved elsewhere. I
Mm,
actually found it a win-win because it not just helped people like me, but everyone else in the workplace. And you might think it's a you problem, but it's actually an everyone problem when you phrase it that way.
I agree. That's a really nice way of turning the problem into everybody's problem, then it becomes a problem worth looking into. Perfect. So for any neurodivergent listeners out there who are currently hunting for a job, what advice do you have to give them?
My advice to you is like basically never view your neurodivergence as disability. In fact, Pratik, I talked to you about this before. I actually don't like the word disability because the
Mhm.
word disability makes it feel like one is basically disabled, which makes it seem like one cannot do anything. And that's why I like to challenge that. I would instead like to say that like for
Differently
neurodivergent,
able.
yeah, exactly. I would rather say other like abled or basically it actually gives you abilities that other people might otherwise overlook. And I
Mm.
think that when you phrase it like that, as in you have other abilities that are unique and there's a lot more that you can offer more to the table, I feel it would even the playing field. I know especially a lot of neurodivergent people, they have a lot of self-esteem regarding themselves because they always felt they had to cater to everyone else. And I like to say to everyone out there, no, you're not catering. You're making society better by advocating for yourself and advocating for everyone involved. And your problem isn't just your problem, and you're basically capable of like evening the playing field. So that's what I like to say. Don't view like, your neurodivergence as a weakness.
I understand. Well, navigating the medical side of this as an adult can be a nightmare. What was the hardest hurdle for you when dealing with the adult diagnostic or support system?
The hardest thing to admit is that um like in terms of capability and relation to myself because I realized I had to work harder than people on certain things that are basically understated or underrated. So I'll give you an example. Pratik, this is for higher functioning autism.
Mhm.
I'm a person who is very blunt. That kind of comes up in my speech sometimes, and I've actually been criticized by a lot of people as a result of that. And I actually had to read 7 to 8 books on communications just to improve my way of speaking because I was like, okay, that's feedback. I don't want it to limit me, but at the same time, I don't want to make it appear like I'm not taking the feedback, right? So that's one thing. A second thing is I had to educate myself. So for instance, I'm actually unable to tell apart like sarcasm, subtle social cues such as body language or expressions sometimes. And additionally, like I cannot tell certain things such as if someone says a joke that is non-literal and I don't get the context of it, I actually would interpret it like word for word directly. This was a very hard hit for me because I feel as human beings, we all want to relate socially to society. And as a very social person, even though I have higher functional autism, I consider myself very social. This hits me very hard. And so to learn that, there are certain limitations for the rest of my life I have to live with was very difficult for me to accept. That's why it hit me very hard.
Understand. Well, where do you feel current media or standard advocacy groups are still totally missing the mark?
What I don't like when I attend a lot of higher functioning autism and various other groups is that some people still feel the need to overcompensate.
Oh,
I think the reason why some people don't like to associate themselves with the higher functioning autism, the OCD or the ADHD banner is that they feel like, oh, it's like they would basically be tied to the role of the victim, which is, oh yeah, people don't get this. So yeah, people don't get this. And I do get why they're frustrated to a certain extent.
mm,
But at the same time, I wish there was more of a positive mindset, which is, hey, there's all the grief, the frustration of basically integrating your identity into yourself. But I almost wish people say, okay, I'm grieving like a self of myself I thought I had, or I thought I had these abilities, but instead phrase it as, hey, these are skills that I can learn. It's not going to be a lot more difficult for me, but as a result, I need a lot more support, and there's no harm asking for help or support. I almost wish people phrase it that way because I think people are so frustrated with the system fatigue. Like, it takes 3 years to get a free official diagnosis from CAMH for higher functioning autism. Because they're frustrated, they kind of use these support groups as sometimes an excuse to basically
mm.
be like, oh, I'm a victim of this. I wish it would be reframed to, please, I need this support, and this is how you can help me. I wish it was reframed like that conversation.
I agree. Well, what does true, authentic inclusion look like for you in daily life? Not just checking a box, but really in real belonging.
I wish I wish my needs were met without me revealing my conditions. And
Mm,
this is a very important thing. A lot of neurodivergent people are afraid of coming forward because they think that, and this is the fear of being diagnosed as well, being like seen as a label attached to you. And I think humans want to be seen more than labels. I was very touched because I went to the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and what stood out to me was that there was actually a neurodivergent room for people like me, and it said, hey, whether you're neurodivergent or not neurodivergent, come to this quiet room if you feel too overly stimulated. And I actually went in, and they had noise counseling, like they had ear defenders, they had stim toys, which is toys you play with when you're overstimulated, like a quiet down room, and I thought, wow, this is wonderful because even people who aren't neurodivergent can enter the room. And I just felt during that 30 to 1 hour period, I was like, wow, someone who actually gets me because I'm sure everyone, neurodivergent or not, feels overly stimulated sometimes when there are a lot of crowds and lots of things to do. I
mhm.
need that space in every workplace and every area I go to just say, hey, you don't need to label yourself, but there's a place for you.
I agree. I happen to recently experience this personally, so I can totally relate to that. Well,
Mm.
thank you, Sabine. I just want to say a massive thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability, your insight, and for sharing your story so openly with us today. You've given me, and I'm sure everyone listening, so much to think about. Before we let you go, where can our listeners find you to follow your journey and support your work?
I guess you can go to my LinkedIn. Like, honestly, I'm searching for a job, so anything regarding that would help me out a lot. You can go to sabinequan.design as well. For those who wish to, like, personally reach out to me, I could be reached out at Kwan, Kwan, dot Sabine at gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. And, like, I feel if we have more support and allies, like, essentially the world would just be a better place in general.
That's fantastic. Well, we will make sure to link all of those in the show notes below. To everyone listening at home, in your car or on your walk, thank you for spending your time with us. Let's keep this conversation going. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Sabine. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pratik. Like, feel free to tell me if I was rambling about, and feel free to edit those snippets as needed. But I'm
No,
also happy to help out with other resources as well.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. No, I really do appreciate. And despite the initial issue with the link, but we managed to do. I managed to finish the entire thing within the time limit. So this looks like a really great stuff. And I'll as soon as I put this up, I'll send you a link. And thank you so much for sharing your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day, Pratik.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
See you.